The Judgment and Exile. The Galactic Confederation Hall gleamed with an unnatural light. Thousands of beings from across known space filled tiered observation platforms that spiraled upward into a vast dome. At the center of this grand chamber stood two humans, alone and small against the backdrop of cosmic judgment. Commander Elara Chen straightened her posture, refusing to be intimidated. Besides her, Dr. Nasir Ahmed clutched a data tablet containing humanity's petition for galactic recognition. They were Earth's chosen representatives, selected after years of preparation following first contact with the Rule Scout vessel that had revealed humanity's place in a vast interstellar community. The Evaluation Council recognizes the representatives of Sol System, Planet Designation Earth, announced High Arbiter Zethmore, a towering figure whose crystalline body refracted light in hypnotic patterns. You may present your case for integration into the Confederation. Dr. Ahmed stepped forward. Esteemed Council, we come in peace and with great hope. Humanity has united in ways unprecedented in our history. We have eliminated most armed conflicts, reduced environmental degradation by 80%, and our scientific advancement rate has. Your scientific advancement rate is precisely the issue, interrupted a hovering entity composed of swirling vapor. In merely 300 of your planetary cycles, you've progressed from simple combustion to rudimentary fusion. The pattern is exponential and deeply concerning. The interruption was just the beginning. For 6 hours, Chen and Ahmed presented Earth's achievements in art, philosophy, science, and social development. Each point was met with skepticism or outright dismissal. The assembled representatives seemed to have decided humanity's fate long before the humans had arrived. Your species' psychological profile is erratic, declared a being that appeared to be little more than a complex arrangement of light. You fluctuate between extraordinary compassion and extreme violence. You create beautiful art while designing weapons of mass destruction. You are, by definition, unpredictable. Chen stepped forward, her patience wearing thin. Every sentient species has contradictions. We acknowledge our flaws, but we've made remarkable progress in a short time, given the opportunity to. The opportunity you request carries risk to stable galactic order, Zethmore stated. We have watched your broadcasts for decades. Your own entertainment media reveals your deepest fears, that you would encounter advanced life and immediately seek to challenge it. Fiction is not reality, Ahmed protested. Those are stories, explorations of possibility, not policy documents. Yet they reflect your instinctual tendencies, said another council member. You imagine conflict because you are inherently conflicted beings. The debate continued until Zethmore raised a crystalline appendage. The council has deliberated. The vote stands 4,892 against integration, 73 for integration, with 215 abstentions. A murmur rippled through the vast chamber as the results were displayed. Chen felt her heart sink, but maintained her diplomatic composure. Humanity is deemed insufficiently stable for full Confederation membership, Zethmore announced. Furthermore, your rapid technological advancement paired with your psychological profile constitutes a Level 3 developmental risk. What exactly does that mean? Chen asked, her voice steady despite her rising alarm. The answer materialized as a holographic display of Earth's solar system, with a thin shell encircling it at approximately 100 astronomical units from the Sun. A quarantine field will be established at the boundaries of your system, Zethmore explained. No vessel or transmission will penetrate this barrier. This containment will remain in place until your species demonstrates sufficient evolutionary stability, approximately 10,000 standard cycles. 10,000 years, Ahmed gasped. You're imprisoning our entire species for 10 millennia based on a psychological assessment. Consider it protection rather than imprisonment, said the vapor entity. Many young species destroy themselves when exposed too quickly to advanced concepts. This gives you time to mature naturally. And if we refuse this quarantine? Chen asked, though she already knew the answer. The alternative was extinction, replied Zethmore dispassionately. Some council members advocated for this option. Be grateful for the compromise reached. As they were escorted back to their ship by silent armored guards, Chen and Ahmed could hardly speak. The magnitude of the judgment weighed on them like a physical force. Their small diplomatic vessel was the last human ship that would cross interstellar space for what might be thousands of years. What do we tell Earth? Ahmed whispered as they left the massive Confederation station. Chen watched through the viewport as enormous generator ships moved into position around the solar system's edge. We tell them the truth, and then we get to work. When they returned to Earth, the news created global turmoil. Riots erupted in major cities. Religious cults declared the end times. Stock markets collapsed. For weeks, civilization teetered on the brink of chaos. Then something unexpected happened. Faced with cosmic rejection, humanity didn't fracture, it unified. The United Earth Coalition formed within months, bringing together nations, corporations, and research institutions under a single purpose: overcoming the quarantine. The message was simple and powerful. They've given us 10,000 years to evolve. Let's show them what humans can do with a deadline. 5 years after the quarantine was established, Dr. Kaya Okafor stood before the Coalition Council in the underground complex beneath Geneva. At 32, she was the youngest person ever to lead the Barrier Research Division, but her brilliance was undeniable. The quarantine field operates on principles we've never encountered before, she explained, gesturing to complex equations floating in holographic display. It's not simply a physical barrier. It exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Can it be breached? Asked Director Victor Alvarez, the stern-faced head of the coalition. Not with brute force, Kaya replied. Every attempt to physically penetrate it has failed, but we've discovered something interesting. She manipulated the display to show a pulsing pattern. The barrier isn't static. It breathes. There are microscopic fluctuations in its structure, lasting just milliseconds. Are these fluctuations predictable? Asked another council member. We believe so. With enough computational power, we might be able to predict when and where these weak points will occur. Director Alvarez leaned forward. And then what? We'd still need a way through. Kaya smiled for the first time. That's where Dr. Lin's team comes in. Dr. Wei Lin stepped forward. At 60, he had been working on theoretical physics when the quarantine began. Now his theories had real-world applications. We've been reverse engineering the barrier's properties, he explained. The Confederation uses what we call 5-dimensional phase technology, but we've developed a theoretical framework for 7-dimensional manipulation. He paused. In simple terms, they built a door we can't open. So we're learning to walk through walls. How long until we have practical applications? Alvarez asked. 10 years, maybe 15 for a working prototype, Kaya replied. Make it 7, Alvarez said firmly. Humanity isn't waiting 10,000 years for permission to exist in this galaxy, not when we can invite ourselves to the party. The research teams worked around the clock. Resources from across Earth and its newly established Mars and Europa colonies poured into the project. Mining operations in the asteroid belt provided raw materials that had once been scarce. The quarantine had forced humanity to look inward for resources and solutions, accelerating development in ways no one had anticipated. 7 years later, in a secure facility on Pluto's moon Charon, the first phase shift vessel prepared for its historic attempt. Named Icarus, despite protests that the mythological reference was tempting fate, the small ship housed just 3 crew members: Captain Miguel Santos, Dr. Kaya Okafor, and Engineer Tamir Patel. The vessel itself resembled no conventional spacecraft. Its hull was embedded with crystalline structures that pulsed with an eerie blue light. Inside, equipment that had not existed a decade before hummed with power. Final diagnostics complete, Tamir reported. Phase shift generators at 100% capacity. On screens throughout the ship, complex models predicted the next fluctuation in the barrier, a momentary weakness that would occur 12.3 kilometers directly ahead of them in exactly 47 minutes. Confederation monitoring satellites are on the far side of their orbital path. Miguel noted, "If we're going to do this undetected, now's our window." Kaya checked her equations one final time. 7 years of work, countless simulations, and 3 unmanned test probes had led to this moment. The probes had disappeared without trace, either destroyed by the barrier or successfully passing through. Now they would learn which. "If this works," she said quietly, "everything changes." "When this works," Miguel corrected her, "humanity doesn't accept prison sentences, not even cosmic ones." As Icarus approached the predicted coordinates, tension filled the small bridge. The barrier itself was invisible to the naked eye, but their instruments detected its multidimensional energy signature. "Fluctuation in 30 seconds, Tamir announced. "Phase shift generators aligned." "Remember," Kaya said, "we'll experience extreme disorientation during the shift. The sensors will be completely offline for approximately 8 seconds. When they come back, we'll either be on the other side or—" She didn't finish the sentence. "Initiating phase shift in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The world around them seemed to bend. Colors that had no name in human language flashed through the cabin. The sensation of moving in multiple directions simultaneously overwhelmed their senses. Kaya felt as if her consciousness was being pulled apart and reassembled. Then, suddenly, stillness. "Systems rebooting," Tamir managed to say, fighting down nausea. For a terrible moment, no one spoke. Had it worked, or had they merely disrupted the barrier temporarily before being contained again? Slowly, the sensors came back online. Star patterns appeared on the navigation display. Miguel checked them against known configurations, then checked again. "These aren't our stars," he whispered. Then louder, with growing excitement, "These aren't our stars. We're outside the barrier." Kaya rushed to the data monitors. "Barrier integrity is maintained. They won't detect the breach." On the main view screen, they looked back toward Sol's system. From here, the barrier was faintly visible, a subtle distortion around their home system. But they were beyond it, the first humans in 7 years to see the stars without prison walls between them. "How long until we need to return?" Miguel asked. "The phase shift generators need 72 hours to recharge," Tamir replied. "Until then, we explore." Kaya stared at the unfamiliar star patterns with a mixture of awe and determination. The Confederation thought they were giving us time to evolve slowly. Instead, they gave us the perfect motivation to evolve faster. As Icarus moved silently into unclaimed space, its crew knew they carried the future of humanity with them. The prison break had just begun, and the prisoners had plans that would reshape the galaxy. The Shadowed Empire rises. 20 years after Icarus first breached the quarantine barrier, Commander Ilara Chen, now Admiral Chen of the Shadow Fleet, stood on the observation deck of the Phoenix, humanity's first extrasolar military vessel. At 67, her hair had gone silver, but her eyes remained sharp as she watched the construction of Sanctuary Base on the planet below. The world had been named Erebus, a cold, dense planet orbiting a red dwarf star, deemed uninhabitable by Confederation standards due to its crushing gravity and toxic atmosphere. For humans adapted through exoskeletal technology and atmospheric processing implants, it was perfect, a fortress world no one would think to look for. "Admiral, the new colonists are safely planet-side," reported Captain Lillebuscher. "That brings our population here to 8,000. "And our other settlements?" Chen asked. "Growing steadily. 17 operational colonies across 9 systems, all on worlds the Confederation considers worthless." Layla smiled. "Turns out uninhabitable just means challenging to the right species." Chen nodded with satisfaction. The strategy had been brilliantly effective. While the Confederation believed humans safely contained within Sol system, a shadow civilization was taking root in the neglected corners of the galaxy. Each colony carefully hidden on worlds no one wanted, each new outpost connected by phase shift technology that the Confederation's sensors couldn't detect. The new manufacturing center is operational, Layla continued. Production of phase shift generators is up 40% from last quarter. This had been the key breakthrough. Once the technology was perfected, specially designed ships could slip through the barrier's fluctuations, carrying colonists and supplies. The bottleneck hadn't been the barrier itself, but production capacity for the complex technology required to breach it. And the research division? Chen asked. Dr. O'Keefer wants to speak with you directly. She says it's important. Minutes later, Kaya O'Keefer's hologram stood before Chen. Though she was physically stationed in the Magellan Research Facility several light-years away, the projection showed every detail of her face, now lined with age but bright with excitement. We've made a breakthrough with the phase technology, Kaya announced without preamble. We can now extend the field to encompass vessels 3 times the size of our current carriers. Military applications? Chen asked immediately. Absolutely. Combat vessels with full defensive and offensive capabilities can now phase through the barrier. But there's more. Kaya's expression grew more intense. We've discovered a way to modify the technology to create weapon systems, projectiles that phase partially through conventional shields, then rematerialize inside them. Chen absorbed this information silently. For 20 years, humanity had focused on escape and establishment. The military applications had always been secondary, a contingency for the day the Confederation inevitably discovered their escape. That day was coming sooner than expected. How soon until deployment? She asked. 6 months for the first prototypes. But Ilara, Kaya hesitated. There's something else you should know. We detected unusual energy signatures near the Cygnus colony last week. The pattern matches Confederation scout ships. I think they're starting to notice discrepancies in their sensor nets. Chen had known this moment would come. No secret could be kept forever, especially one spanning multiple star systems. The question had always been, how long could they remain hidden, and how strong would they be when discovered? Accelerate production, she ordered, and inform Director Alvarez on Earth. The coalition needs to prepare for potential disclosure. 3 months later, Chen's fears were realized. A Confederation patrol vessel detected a human transport ship returning to Sol system. The transport managed to complete its phase shift before capture, but the Confederation now knew their quarantine had been breached. On Erebus, Chen convened an emergency council of colonial leaders. The secure communication chamber hummed with tension as representatives from 17 colonies projected into the room, along with Director Alvarez from Earth. The Confederation has dispatched investigative vessels to all systems within 20 light-years of Sol, Alvarez reported. They're searching methodically for signs of human settlement. How long until they find one of our colonies? Asked the governor of Tartarus, a mining settlement built within the churning storms of a gas giant. Weeks, maybe days, Chen replied. Our concealment measures are good, but not against a focused search. Then perhaps concealment is no longer the answer, said a new voice. The hologram that appeared was not human, startling several council members. The figure was tall and spider-like, with multiple limbs and iridescent eyes. This was Ambassador Skaveri of the Nyx, a species humanity had discovered 3 years earlier on a world deep within what humans had named the Shadow Sectors, regions avoided by the Confederation due to navigational hazards. The Nyx had their own quarantine story, deemed ecologically incompatible with Confederation species due to their ammonia-based biology. They had been isolated on their homeworld for centuries before developing their own means of space travel. The Confederation relies on fear and control, Skaveri continued. They isolate species they consider dangerous or unpredictable, but they only control the parts of the galaxy they value. The shadows between their worlds have become our domain. "Are you suggesting open conflict?" asked one of the colony governors, alarm evident in his voice. "I am suggesting open existence," Zgaveri replied. "The Shadow Alliance already includes 4 species rejected by the Confederation. Together, we have claimed dozens of worlds they deemed worthless. We have developed technologies they thought impossible. Perhaps it is time to step from the shadows and claim our place." The chamber erupted in debate. Some colony leaders advocated continued secrecy, relocating threatened settlements deeper into unclaimed space. Others agreed with Zgaveri. The time for hiding was ending. Chen listened to all sides before raising her hand for silence. "We've spent 20 years preparing for this moment. We knew discovery was inevitable. The question now is, do we negotiate from weakness or strength?" 2 weeks later, a Confederation battlecruiser entered orbit around Themis, humanity's agricultural colony on a radiation-bathed moon that conventional species couldn't inhabit. Humans modified with radiation-resistant genes had transformed its barren surface into vast hydroponics facilities that fed 3 other colonies. The Confederation vessel, the Justice of Ages, dwarfed the defensive platforms orbiting Themis. Its commander, Supreme Enforcer Vexter, was renowned for his ruthless efficiency in dealing with lawbreakers. Unauthorized human settlement. Vexter's message boomed across all frequencies. "You have violated Quarantine Directive 5591. All inhabitants will surrender for immediate return to Sol system. Resistance will result in orbital bombardment." Governor Sophia Kim of Themis stood in her colony's command center, facing the aliens' projection with remarkable calm for someone being threatened with annihilation. "Supreme Enforcer," she replied, "we recognize no authority of the Confederation over human movement. We reject the quarantine as an unlawful imprisonment of a sentient species without due process." "Your rejection is irrelevant," Vexter stated. "Confederation law is absolute. You have 1 planetary rotation to begin evacuation procedures." "Before you take action," Kim said, "I should inform you that we have transmitted our coordinates to all human settlements. Any aggressive move against Themis will reveal the Confederation's failure to contain us for the past 20 years. Vexter's expression didn't change, but there was a telling pause before he responded. "All human settlements will be located and contained. Your threats are meaningless." "Are they?" Kim smiled slightly. "Supreme Enforcer, I would like to introduce Admiral Ilara Chen of the Human Shadow Fleet." Chen's projection appeared beside Kim's. "Supreme Enforcer Vexter, I suggest you check your long-range sensors. You may find the situation more complex than you anticipated." As if on cue, ships began emerging from phase shift, appearing instantaneously around Themis. Not just human vessels, but ships of Nyx design and other allied species. Within minutes, the Confederation battlecruiser was surrounded by a fleet that matched its firepower. "Impossible," Vexter whispered, his composure finally breaking. "These vessels, this technology, 20 years ago, your Confederation declared us unfit for the stars," Chen said. "You gave us a choice between imprisonment and extinction. We chose a third option." More ships continued to arrive. Freighters, colony ships, mining vessels, each representing a piece of the shadow civilization humans had built while the Confederation believed them safely contained. "We have established 17 major colonies and 38 outposts," Chen continued. "We have forged alliances with 3 other species your Confederation rejected. We have developed technologies that surpass your understanding. And we have done all this in the shadows you never thought to look into." Vexter's multiple eyes blinked rapidly as he processed this information. "The Confederation Council will never accept this violation." "The Council won't have a choice," Chen replied. "We're not asking for permission to exist. We're informing you of a new reality." On screens throughout human space, people watched the confrontation unfold. In the Confederation Council chamber, emergency sessions were called as the news spread. Humans had not only escaped their quarantine, but had built a thriving civilization in secret. 2 days later, a formal delegation arrived at Themis, not to enforce the quarantine, but to negotiate with what they now called the Shadow Alliance. Among them was High Arbiter Zeth Mor, noticeably aged since pronouncing humanity's sentence 27 years earlier. In the colony's meeting hall, Chen faced him across a table of Themis-grown wood, a deliberate reminder of humanity's ability to transform hostile environments. You understand the Council cannot simply ignore 27 years of quarantine violation, Zeth Mor began. And you understand we cannot simply return to our cage, Chen replied. Nor can the Nyx, the Volran, or the Kith. Your Confederation has a habit of locking away species that don't fit your definition of stable. These quarantines are for the protection of all, Zeth Mor insisted. Unpredictable species. I think recent events have proven which of us is more adaptable to changing circumstances, Chen interrupted. Your Confederation has grown complacent, claiming the valuable worlds and ignoring the rest. In those ignored spaces, we've built something new. What exactly are you proposing? Zeth Mor asked. Recognition. The Shadow Alliance will be acknowledged as a sovereign political entity. The quarantine around Sol system will be lifted. Free trade and travel will be established between our territories. And if we refuse? Chen smiled thinly. We've already demonstrated our ability to operate undetected within your space. We've developed technologies you thought impossible. How much of your commerce, your communication, your security do you think we could disrupt if we chose to? She leaned forward. But that's not what we want. Conflict benefits no one. Cooperation benefits all. You would have us cooperate with those we once deemed dangerous, Zeth Mor observed. No, Chen corrected. We would have you cooperate with those who have proven your judgment wrong. 3 months later, the quarantine field around Sol system flickered and died. For the first time in nearly 3 decades, Earth had an unobstructed view of the stars. Ships from the colonies began arriving openly, bringing technologies, resources, and stories from the Shadow civilization that had grown beyond the barrier. On the observation deck of the Phoenix, now orbiting Earth, Admiral Chen watched the celebrations below. Beside her stood Dr. Kaya Okafor and Ambassador Skaveri. Did you ever imagine this outcome when we first breached the barrier? Kaya asked. Chen considered the question. I hoped for survival. I planned for freedom. But this. She gestured toward the bustling activity around them. Humans working alongside allied species from the Shadow Alliance. This exceeds even my expectations. The Confederation sought to contain what they feared, Skaveri observed, multiple limbs gesturing in the Nyx equivalent of amusement. They created exactly what they feared instead. No, Chen disagreed. They feared chaos and conflict. We've built order and alliance. They thought isolation would make us evolve slowly. Instead, it drove us to evolve faster. Below them, Earth shined with renewed purpose. Beyond it stretched not just the solar system, but a network of worlds transformed by human ingenuity. Testament to a simple truth the Confederation had failed to understand. Humans didn't need permission to thrive among the stars. They just needed a challenge worthy of their determination. The exile had ended. The Shadow Empire had emerged into the light, and the galaxy would never be the same.